Are you playing on your computer in your room again? You really have an easy life, my mother-in-law, Kathy, commented with a disapproving tone. No, that's not true. I'm working from home. I'm not just playing around, I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, but I've seen you playing games on your computer screen before. Don't lie to me, I won't be fooled. Kathy absolutely refuses to accept that I work from home. To her, work means leaving the house and going to a physical office, and she's unwilling to reconsider this outdated notion. One day, she announced, Meg is coming back. I plan to let her stay here, so could you give up your room to her and leave? What? I was stunned. Does she realize Ken and I are the ones paying the $5,000 rent for this house? If I leave, that means... But before I could finish, I saw the cold determination in her eyes. Despite the absurdity of it, Kathy's efforts to push me out continued relentlessly. I decided it was time to go, just as she wanted. The very next day, the moving company she had called arrived. Which belongings should I move? One of the workers asked. All of mine, I replied calmly, watching as Kathy's face paled with every box they carried out. What are you doing? She finally demanded, her voice tinged with panic. Just taking all my belongings, I said, my tone even. As my things were loaded into the truck one after another, Kathy's expression turned increasingly blue. My name is Jane, a 34-year-old remote worker. My husband Ken, and I got married 2 years ago. At the time, I was working in an office where Ken was also a colleague. The company was small but had a warm, welcoming atmosphere. We often went out for drinks with our coworkers, and through our shared love of reading, Ken and I grew closer. After 3 years of dating, we got married. It was a beautiful workplace romance that blossomed into a life together. Our colleagues celebrated our marriage with great joy. Shortly after our wedding, I decided to pursue my long-held dream of working from home and left my office job. My juniors were teary-eyed as they wished me well. We'll miss you, senior. Please come visit us, they said, sending me off with bouquets and warm hugs. It was a wonderful company, and I hoped Ken would continue to thrive there. Since childhood, I've loved reading, which naturally led to a passion for writing novels. In my spare time, I would write and enter contests. One day, one of my works caught the attention of a publishing house that had previously shown interest in me. That was the moment my dream became a reality. I became a professional novelist. I quit my job just as we got married and made my debut in the literary world. Initially, Ken and I lived in a small apartment, where our life together was simple but filled with happiness. He was incredibly supportive, giving me the time I needed to write and even helping with household chores, especially when deadlines loomed. We truly supported each other. However, our peaceful life took a sudden turn when we received news that my father-in-law, Ben, had fallen ill. We rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Lying quietly in the hospital bed was Ben, who had already passed away. Dad, Dad, Ken cried, but there was no response. No matter how much we called, Dad wouldn't wake up. Kathy held his cold hand, weeping, Dad. His passing left a profound impact on all of us, especially Kathy, who clung tightly to him, her sobs echoing through the room. I hadn't known Ben well, but seeing their grief, I couldn't help but cry with them. Little did I know then just how much his death would change our lives moving forward. As a novelist, my career was thriving. I had a book published and a series was starting in a magazine. My work was progressing smoothly, and my income was steadily increasing. Ken was my biggest supporter. Jane, you're amazing, he would say, beaming with pride. Quitting your job to focus on your writing was the right decision. I'll support you all the way. Keep it up. His encouragement was my greatest strength. 2 years had passed since Ben's death. Kathy, who had been deeply depressed initially, was gradually regaining her spirits and managing to live on her own. Meg had gotten married and moved to a place a bit far from her childhood home, making it difficult for her to visit often. Since we lived close to Ken's family home, Kathy frequently contacted Ken, inviting us over. Are you well? I bought some delicious sashimi today. Let's eat together, she would say. Or, I accidentally bought 2 packs of eggs. Could you come over and take one? Ken believed she must be lonely living alone, so we tried to visit as often as possible. Remembering the grief-stricken look on Kathy's face when Ben passed away, I wanted to comfort her, so I would often interrupt my work to accompany Ken. Seeing her face light up when we arrived made us both feel relieved. However, the frequency of Kathy's calls began to increase, and it started to affect my work deadlines. Around this time, Ken suggested, Jane's work is being impacted, and I'm getting tired too. How about we move in with my mother? The idea took me by surprise. Living together, I remembered stories from friends who had lived with their mothers-in-law and felt a wave of anxiety. Can I manage it with your mother? Ken reassured me, it'll be fine, Jane. We'll set up a dedicated workroom for you so you can work without interruptions. We'll also ensure our bedroom and personal spaces are private. Plus, if something happens to Mom, we can respond quickly and we won't have to go out as much. Gradually, I warmed to the idea. I was concerned about Kathy, and the constant calls were disrupting my work schedule. Living together would be more convenient for us, and it would keep Kathy from feeling lonely. However, there was a practical concern. Our house was a bit small. Isn't it going to be difficult for 3 people to live in that house? I wondered aloud. I asked, is that true? Ken nodded. Yes, and I'd been thinking about finding a slightly larger place for us. He showed me pamphlets of different properties. You've already found one? I asked, surprised. Yeah, I've been considering it for a while. I think this apartment would be comfortable since it has many rooms, Ken replied. The apartment he had in mind was spacious, with plenty of layout options, but the rent was on the higher side. Still, given my current income, it wasn't unreasonable. I agreed with his proposal, saying, that sounds good. Ken smiled warmly and said, thank you. He immediately contacted his mother, Kathy, who readily agreed to the plan. Kathy sold her house, and we all moved into the new apartment together. Looking back, I wish I had taken more time to understand Kathy before deciding to live together. I never imagined that this casual agreement would lead to deep regret later. At first, Kathy loved the new apartment. It had enough rooms, a spacious kitchen, and even a sauna in the bathroom. The rent was high at $5,000, but the place was comfortable and met all our needs. The newly built apartment had that pleasant new house smell, and both the interior and exterior were spotless. Seeing Kathy so delighted, almost childlike in her happiness, made me think that maybe living together was the right choice. Initially, everything went smoothly, and we lived together harmoniously. I had explained my work-from-home situation properly, and Kathy even helped with the household chores. Ken found it more convenient to commute since our new apartment was closer to the station, and he spent the extra time he gained with us. However, after a while, I noticed a change in Kathy's attitude. Jane, what are you doing in your room all day? If you're just playing, can't you do something more productive? She asked one day. No, Kathy, as I mentioned before, I'm working, I replied. I know you say it's work, but you're always engrossed in games, right? She insisted. No, that's not it. I tried to explain, but it seemed Kathy had misunderstood. She had once seen a game screen on my computer during a visit to my room and assumed I was pretending to work while playing. In reality, I was writing novels and also doing video editing work. The editing involved streams of a specific game, and Kathy had walked in while I was working on that. Actually, in addition to writing novels, I also do video editing as a side job, I explained. Video editing? What's that? I don't quite understand, but it's still a game, right? Kathy responded, her tone skeptical. No, it's not. I tried to clarify. But Kathy shook her head, refusing to listen. I won't be fooled anymore. I was helping with household chores because you said it was work, but I'm not doing it anymore. You should handle all the housework. Working from home sounds suspicious. Work should be done outside. Kathy, it's possible to work without leaving the house nowadays. I tried to reason with her. Don't try to deceive me, she snapped. I was surprised and confused by Kathy's sudden change in attitude. After that, her harsh treatment toward me intensified day by day. Don't you notice there's trash on the hallway floor? Can you clean it? She demanded. You hadn't started preparing dinner yet? I'm hungry. I want sweet and sour pork tonight, Jane. Please make it. Kathy stopped helping with household chores altogether, leaving everything to me. I had to interrupt my work daily to take care of the household tasks. When it was just the 2 of us, I could manage cooking in between work, but after Kathy moved in, it became increasingly difficult. As a result, I had to do video editing late into the night. As Kathy's harsh behavior escalated, I brought it up with Ken. However, he didn't take me seriously. Mom bullying you? Impossible. She would never do that. Ken dismissed my concerns. It's true, I insisted. Recently, she's left all the household chores to me, so I can't focus on my work. You're overthinking it, Jane. Mom is getting older and tires easily. Maybe that's why it feels like she's bullying you. Aren't you tired from your computer work? Ken replied, completely siding with Kathy. Don't you believe me? I asked, disappointed. Ken's lack of understanding left me feeling isolated. After that, Kathy's treatment only got worse. Recently, she even started pressuring me about grandchildren, asking, when will you have a child? When can I see my grandchild? Kathy demanded. When I calmly explained that it was something for Ken and me to decide as a couple, she shot back, are you infertile? I'll introduce you to a doctor, and started dialing the hospital. I quickly took the phone from her. I don't think we're infertile, I said firmly. Please give us a little more time. Time? I don't have much time left. I want to see my grandchild. What's the point of having a daughter-in-law who can't bear children? Her sharp words cut through me, and the stress only intensified. I'm sorry, but I have a work deadline approaching, I said, trying to escape to my room. Off to play on the computer again? How lazy, while your husband works so hard, Kathy sneered. She completely refused to understand that I was working from home. Her belief that work must be done outside the house was deeply ingrained, and she seemed unwilling to change her mindset. As if that wasn't enough, she continued, Meg is coming back soon. She plans to live here, so please give your room to her. What? Why? I asked, bewildered. Meg is pregnant and wants to come back home for childbirth. Unlike you, she's a proper daughter-in-law fulfilling her role by getting pregnant. So, I want her to use your room, Kathy declared. I was utterly shocked by this sudden proposal. But before I could respond, Kathy added even more harshly, so I want you to leave this house. Understand that properly. Why should I have to leave this house? Why am I being told such a thing? This is my home too, I protested, trying to make sense of the situation. Kathy laughed scornfully. You say it's your home, but you're just a parasite who doesn't do any proper work. In fact, you're just in the way. If you want to play on your computer, you can go somewhere else. There's an internet cafe near the station. Unable to bear Kathy's relentless pressure, I finally said, okay, I'll leave, and decided to move out as she requested. Kathy's triumphant smile only deepened as I immediately went back to my room and began packing. I could hear her humming happily as I did so. That night, I decided to consult with Ken one more time. I wanted to gauge his reaction, but Ken never seemed to understand my feelings. My mother couldn't have said such a thing. It's just another one of your delusions, Jane. Stop making Mom suffer. Me? Making your mother suffer? Isn't it the other way around? I retorted, but he wasn't listening. If Maggie's coming back home for childbirth, why don't you go back to your parents' home for a while? It would be easier for her, and it's just for a short time, he suggested. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wanted me to leave too. That was the breaking point. I felt my love for Ken start to fade, and I began to prepare for the move with new resolve. Kathy, clearly pleased that I was leaving, quickly arranged for a moving company. The next day, the movers arrived, arranged by Kathy herself. Which belongings should we move? They asked. Before Kathy could speak, I quickly responded, all of my belongings, please. All of them? What do you mean by all? The movers asked, confused. Everything, I replied calmly. All the furniture and appliances in this house. Kathy's face flushed with shock. Wait, what? What are you saying? I continued to ignore her. Would you like to move these items to your new home, or should we buy them from you? The mover asked. Please purchase them, I said without hesitation. Kathy, now in a panic, grabbed my arm and shook me hard. What are you saying? Answer me. I knew the moving company Kathy hired also dealt with purchasing goods, which is why I had decided to sell everything. The movers began carrying out the furniture and appliances one by one. Kathy watched in disbelief as her belongings were taken away, but I remained calm. Wait, what are you doing? She demanded. I'm just taking all my belongings, I replied, unbothered by her distress. This is unbelievable. We have no place to live. Kathy cried out. That's not my concern. I purchased these items for this house, I stated firmly. Lies. You're lying again, she spat back. If you think it's a lie, ask your son to confirm, I suggested coolly. Desperate, Kathy called Ken, who was at work. Hey, is it true that Jane bought all the furniture and appliances in this house? Kathy asked Ken frantically over the phone. Yeah, Mom, that's right. Is there a problem? I'm in a meeting right now, Ken replied, sounding impatient before hanging up. I handed Kathy a piece of paper. I'll leave this for you, I said. She looked down at it and saw that it was a divorce petition already signed by me. What is this? I've decided to get a divorce, I stated calmly. I'm leaving this house. Divorce? Why? I never said you had to leave. Kathy exclaimed, clearly taken aback. After being bullied by you and told to leave for your daughter's childbirth, do you think I have any reason to stay? Your son is a mama's boy who only listens to you and never tries to understand me. You said a daughter-in-law without grandchildren is useless. My role as your daughter-in-law ends here. Please give this divorce petition to your son. Kathy was initially stunned, but quickly retorted, maybe that's for the best. Now my daughter can stay here comfortably, and I won't have to deal with your seclusion anymore. I can use this big kitchen all by myself. How thankful I am. I responded coolly, well, whether your son can afford the rent for this house is another matter. She looked confused. What do you mean? The rent for this house is $5,000 a month, I informed her. Her complexion changed. $5,000? Yes, I confirmed. I have been paying it with the earnings from my novels. Novels? Kathy was clearly shaken. Here's the translation of your text, I continued, handing her a paper. Of course, Ken's salary alone could never cover a $5,000 monthly rent. You've always criticized me for just playing on the computer, but in reality, I've been working hard. I write novels, have published books, and even made it onto the bestseller list in newspapers. But I guess you wouldn't understand, since you think of me as a recluse. Kathy was at a loss for words. And about those games you mentioned, I have a talent in that field too. My editing work has increased, and so has my income. I've been paying for all the living expenses and miscellaneous costs of this house. The arrogant attitude Kathy had just moments ago completely vanished. Jane, wait a minute. I was wrong. I had no idea about any of this. Please don't leave. Without you, we can't live, she said, clinging to my feet. What is this all about? I muttered. It seems to me that you only need me to pay the rent. Kathy's eyes widened in surprise. No, it's not like that, she frantically denied. I said it wrong. You are needed by our family, by my son, so please don't think about divorce. Stay here, I'm begging you. But I calmly replied, it's too late, Kathy. I've already found a new place to live. I plan to spend my time there freely, writing my novels, I quietly told Kathy. She was trembling as she dialed her son. He's in a meeting, she shouted in frustration, but she persisted. Jane says she's leaving the house. She wants a divorce. What should we do? What about the rent? Once again, her only concern was the rent. She handed me the phone, and Ken's desperate voice came through. Jane, what's happening? Why a divorce? You never listened to me, I replied calmly. You even told me to leave, just following your mother's orders. That was just temporary, he insisted. I didn't mean forever. I've tried to talk to you many times about the way your mother treated me, but you always took her side. I can't stay here any longer. The movers are already here. I'm leaving. So enjoy living with your family starting tomorrow, and do your best to pay the rent. I hung up the phone. Everything is done. What's next? The movers asked, the room now completely empty. Yes, we're ready to leave, I said, picking up my bag and turning towards Kathy. I appreciate everything, Kathy. Take care. With that, I left the house with the movers. When Ken returned from work, he found the house empty, no furniture, no appliances, and Kathy sitting alone, looking lost. He too stood there, bewildered by the emptiness. Ken initially opposed the divorce, but I submitted recordings of the bullying I had endured as evidence through a lawyer and formally filed for divorce. Eventually, Ken accepted the situation, and we officially divorced. Without my income to cover the $5,000 rent, the family had no choice but to cancel the lease. By the time my sister-in-law returned, Ken, Kathy, and Meg had moved into a small rental apartment. They had to purchase new furniture and appliances, which left them with little money for rent, forcing them into an even more cramped living space. To make matters worse, it turned out that Meg hadn't returned home for childbirth, but because she had been divorced after an affair and kicked out by her husband. She might have expected to live in a luxurious apartment, but instead, she faced life in a small, cramped space, along with the added burden of alimony debt. From what I've heard, the entire family is barely making ends meet with their jobs. Meanwhile, I bought a new high-rise apartment. There, I freely write novels, work on video editing, and live comfortably without having to consider anyone else. I eat what I want, rest when I please, and enjoy my days in peace. I've even started a new series, and the joy I find in my work is unending. For now, I plan to stay away from romance and marriage, fully enjoying my single life, focus on my career.